Alright, it is NeXTstation upgrade time. So here's the Mono NeXTstation slab I've had for, I don't know, a week or two now. And some upgrades I've got ready for it. So probably most importantly is the RAM. We have 8 4 meg sticks here. Right now it has 4 2 meg sticks, so going from 8 megs to 32 megs will be a pretty significant jump. Then I am going to be replacing the fan. It's got kind of a crusty old 12-volt fan that's very noisy, with this Noctua NFR8 Redo or Redux fan, which is definitely a fancier fan than this thing really needs. It's certainly not going to be a PWM system, but it'll be quieter and maybe even move more air. And then it has a SCSI to SD in it already, but it's an older V5. So here I've got a V6 as well as an SD card for it, and then also the power harness. I'll need to do some modification. I'm going to swap out this female connector to a male connector, and I'll also remove the yellow 12-volt line because that is not necessary at all here. But yeah, so that's the first step. Or that's everything laid out. Next step is going to be remove the monitor. Go ahead and move that. Clean up a little bit. Then pop this thing open and pull out the existing RAM. DD the image over to the new SD card here. Pop in the new fan. And yeah, that'll be it. And we'll be good to go. So before I start swapping parts around, I just want to do a quick update on its current configuration. So here's the stock fan, and being from the early 90s, it despite having very smooth bearings, it's just noisy. So that's gonna go. Of course, it is only 12-volt fan, so it's on all the time. There's not a whole lot I can do about that. I misspoke earlier about the RAM configuration. Instead of being 4 2s, it's actually 8 1s, which these are the sparsest 30-pin DIMMs I've ever seen. Just 2 512K chips. And I'm gonna have to be careful getting those out because these slots are a little bit different than normal 30-pin DIMMs or 30-pin SIM slots, and they're a bit fragile. So then there's also the this is the existing SCSI to SD I have in here. This is the version 5.0B model, and 2 things going on here that I don't really like that are probably pretty obvious. One is this SCSI cable is massive. This is actually the SCSI cable I initially ordered with this, and for use in like a compact Mac or something, it works just fine. And here, I think it looks quite ugly. And then also, this is a little bit harder to tell if you don't know what it's supposed to look like, but the power cable, or the power connector rather, on the SCSI to SD is upside down. So this short power jumper line is flipped, and that causes these wires to get they just don't look very good. So 2 things that I'm going to do with the V6. First off, it's important to note here, 1, it is bigger, so it's going to be mounted farther forward, but there's plenty of space here, so it's not going to interfere with anything. But the power connector is this smaller floppy connector, and that's to accommodate for having the narrower width of this particular board. On many machines, both of these can actually be bus powered, but on some older machine, for example this one, the SCSI bus, at least in my experience, with my own testing, it just doesn't provide enough current for these to run, which is fine because there's that power. But the downside is, you got to get that power to that connector. So in my case, the provider of the SCSI to SD version 6 provided me with a couple of these, which are pretty standard adapters. But what I'm going to do, well, what I'm going to try and do, is see if I can essentially adapt this connector to fit with this setup, and that may not be possible, but I'm going to try at least. At the very least, I can cut some wires and do a little bit of soldering, because this is already fairly long. You know, that cable is about 2 inches long, 3 inches long. I just want it to look neat and tidy, really is it. Now this is the original SCSI cable that this machine's shipped with. And as you can see, it's very small. You know, this is maybe 1.5 inches worth of ribbon cable. And you know, the idea is that there's the connector on the board right there. Right, the idea is that it clicks in and then just hops immediately over the drive, which is nice. Keep a really short run, which is good for signal integrity and, you know, just cleanliness and have good airflow and all that fun stuff. But this connector, because it's older, who knows, it fell out of that one, out of the version 5.0B. But in this one, it's funny, if I just slide it in a little bit, it doesn't, you know, you can see it wiggles, it's kind of loose. If you listen, if I push it, oh, maybe it's not going to do it again. Hear that click? It clicks. I've never had a SCSI cable that clicks in, but then it locks in really tight. It's holding in there. It's not going anywhere. I can't speak for the data integrity. I haven't tested this yet, but I'm hoping that since that clicks in and locks into place, I'm hoping that I can use this short cable, and then that with the power modifications, I'll have a tidier looking setup than this mess. But the next step now is I'm going to go ahead and take out this fan, and I can do this all in this same video. So let's go ahead and just get started here. So it's just held in with these 2 screws in the corners. These are stock. Nice big, if it's going to focus, looks like maybe an M5 machine screw. I'm not really sure. I don't know all the types. So it's power on the left-hand side, ground on the right, and then the fan just lifts straight out. So Petite Ace 25, 12 volts, 0.9 amps. So bearings are still in really good shape, but it's a little dusty. Yeah, the way these are designed is actually fairly interesting. So the power supply is pretty thin. It's only this module right here, only about 1 inch tall. So what this fan does is it actually pulls air in from the top. So from this grill in the back, this is the only opening aside from the floppy drive. But I don't think, the floppy drive is probably sealed off enough. Yeah, I don't think air can come in through the floppy drive, at least not in bulk for the rest of the system. But air comes in those back holes, you know, is pulled over the drive. Of course, the drive is one of the biggest heat producers. That's why it's really important to put a SCSI to SD or similar solid-state device in these machines. The air is pulled in from the back. It's pulled over the CPU, which also runs fairly toasty, and up into the case, because, you know, the top of the case is only just maybe half an inch above this fan, which is angled, if that wasn't clear. And then it gets blown out. These aren't just fins, these are ribs that actually run the full length of the case. And then at the back here, there are vents. Actually, you know what, let me disconnect a couple cables here. If I lift it up, you can see these ribs that run the full length. Yeah, so they cool the power supply, which is a pretty interesting design. But you have to be really careful that that back area never gets blocked, because that is the only exhaust in the whole machine. So this fan, the new one, I am going to have, so one thing pretty obvious is the cable on the new one is about 3 times longer than on the old one. So what I'm going to do is position it thuswards, with the cable coming out on this corner, and then wrapping the cable around it so that it pops out right like here. No big deal. Whoop. And then on this cable, yellow and black are the 12 volt in the ground. And I might have to do some reconfiguration on here, because let's see if I flip it around this way. Yeah, that'll work. So the TAC and PWM pins are just floating, but the yellow is on the positive rail and the ground. So the right pin is the ground, the left pin is positive. And just clunk. Oh, come on now. Oh, geez. And just like that, it's connected. But I need to tie this down. And what I'll do is run the bolts on the outside of the line, if I can pull it tight enough so that the bolts will kind of hold it in place. Because the sheathing on this fan this is really intense. It's a bit much. It's nice, but it's a bit much. Anyway, so that's the fans. I'll do that in a minute here. Scoot that over. Now I'm going to spin the system. And let's take a good look at this RAM. This is a little bit dusty. I could blow this out again. That would probably be a good idea. Yeah, you can see slots, and then there's clips. Kind of at the back there. They're kind of hard to see, but there are clips down there. And so what's recommended is Next actually made and provided a right angle, like a dental hook that you could put into that hole and then lever up to pop them out from one side and then swing them up. Which I don't love the idea of, but I've seen videos of a number of people doing it, so I think it's all right. On the NeXTstation Color, there's 72 pin sims, and it's a totally normal removal, normal clips like you'd be accustomed to in another system with 72 pin sims. Right now, I'm going to go ahead and pull out the SCSI SD in here. It's just not needed right now, so it's going to get replaced anyway. Yeah, see, I don't know if I can. I obviously can't do a pin swap, but I don't know if I can re-crimp those either. I don't have one of those crimpers at hand. Yeah, I don't know. I just don't really. Of course, I could always replace that socket on the board. We do not want to do soldering on this board. I don't know. I might just suck it up and use that cable with this thing and just have a mess in there. But at the very least, that looks pretty tidy. It would be nice to be able to get to the micro USB port and the SD card while this is installed. We'll have to see. Let me set down my camera and take a look in my toolbox here and see if I have a little dental hook. I used to. a small enough Allen wrench could do it. Of course, do I have a small Allen wrench in this bag? It doesn't look like it. So what I'm wondering is, could I put in this little screwdriver? I need a little bit more light. This will help. It's a little bit more light, I guess. Of course, part of the problem is that these Sims have been in place for, you know, almost 30 years, so they're kind of seized. And, interestingly, this board is not anchored. Or at least it's not anchored right here. So when I'm pulling up on these Sims, the whole thing is flexing, which I do not like. So I'm going to put my thumb on the RAM battery. Oh, there we go. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm using the corner of the slot. There we go. To sort of press up that little bit. And then I can drop my phone. Derp, derp. See if I can get my phone wedged back into place here. So this Sim is free. Gosh, it's tight. Not a whole lot in the way of markings. I'll keep these around. It's nice to have a matching set of 30-pin Sims, even if they are only half a meg each. So let's see if I can repeat the procedure on this one. So put the screwdriver in, push the tab back, a little bit of leverage. Yeah, I had read that once you get the first one out, the rest come out more easily because you can use the adjacent slots for more leverage. There's the second one. Man, that one is stiff. Whew. All right, I'm not going to do all 8 of these on camera. You get the idea. But you can also see these slots are pretty dusty. So I'm gonna blast this thing out before I put in the new ones. Just for comparison, they're a little bit taller, but height is not an issue in this case. You know, they could go all the way up to here. So, yep, I'm going to pull out the rest of these. I'm going to blow it out. I'm going to install the new ones. And then we'll do the fan. And then we'll do the prep work on the SD card. And then that'll be it. We'll fire it up. All right, some more progress here. I have the SCSI SD fitted, and I'm mostly happy with it. The one thing that I'm not really thrilled about, while the board is narrower than the older version, the placement of the SCSI connector does not match a drive. So in this case, and we can see these two standoffs I've got attached here, those perfectly matched the mounting hole there, right? So it's set perfectly like this, and this connector sat exactly where a hard drive would be, aside from the Molex power connector being upside down. On the V6, it is shifted, I guess to the right, is how you would say that, by just a little bit, like 1/4 of an inch, really not that much. And that's not a huge issue, I think, probably in 99% of cases. And maybe not in this case, because this connector does fit. There is a little bit of wiggle room, but it's torqued a little bit in a way that I don't really love. And, you know, I could put this guy in place of it, but it's huge, and if I can avoid it, I will. So I'm going to test on this for a little while. And, you know, also, something that's occurred to me is the way these crimp-on connectors work, I can just pop off the end here, and I could cut this down into a shorter connector that would work just fine. You know, so not as short as this, not as long as that, probably in the 3 to 4 inch range, something that would give me a little bit more wiggle room than this. So that's probably what I'll try next. I've never actually done that before, but I think it should probably be easy enough as long as I keep everything square. So that's SCSI stuff. I removed the floppy drive, and the nice thing about the V6 SCSI to SD is that you can actually flash the SD card, which is not installed, but it would go right there, over a USB, which is nice. And so I've got a cable plugged in, and I've confirmed that this connector does fit when the floppy drive is in place. And the cable has to bend about like that, which isn't too much. It's a little bit more than I like, but it's not too much. Maybe one day I'll get a right angle micro USB connector. That's a little bit overkill, but I pulled out the floppy drive for 2 reasons. One, because I want to know exactly what was underneath it. There's a Motorola chip and a couple of custom chips. I don't know what those are. Haven't looked them up. But for the time being, I'm going to leave the floppy drive out for 2 reasons. One, it doesn't work right now. It doesn't eject. It feels kind of gummy, so it may just need to be lubricated and cleaned out, so that'll be a separate project. And then also, you know, between the SCSI to SD and the network, I don't really need a floppy drive, but I would like to have it. I would like it to work just for the sake of completeness. But for giggles, I can leave the SCSI to SD USB cable hanging out of the floppy port. So there's that. The RAM upgrade went swimmingly. We have, I haven't tested it yet, obviously, but everything is in place. I got all the slots blown out. And then lastly is the fan. And what I ended up doing was I had initially discussed having the cable connection point basically have the fan rotated 90 degrees, but I didn't rotate 90 degrees counterclockwise, and then the power cable does a full revolution around, crosses back underneath. It's tucked behind this capacitor. There's no torque on this capacitor. It's just resting there. And then it is plugged in on the header right here. And then you can see how I have that cable tucked in between the screw there. So it's really, it's tucked in there. It's not rubbing on the screw. It's not going to get damaged. I mean, especially with this, sheathing here, which is relatively heavy. I think the only thing I would really like to do, because I don't like this 4-pin connector sitting on a 2-pin header, is I may swap this one over. Basically just punch out the pins and swap that over. But that really, I mean, that's silly. silly thing to do. It's holding on very securely on its own. It's not going anywhere. It's just fine. That's the floppy header. I'm probably just gonna leave that unpopulated. I noticed some brown residue on the CPU. Don't know what that is. Gonna get a Q-tip with some alcohol and see if I can clean that up just for the sake of appearances. If I get the light more directly on it, you can see it more clearly. It's kind of weird. Don't know what that is. But yeah, otherwise, so far, this is coming along just fine. I'm very much looking forward to hearing that fan. And I realized I should have recorded the noise levels of the old one. So what I might do is put 12 volts straight on it, but more likely I'll just shoot another video when I'm doing all the same stuff to the NeXTstation color, and I'll compare how it sounds, because its fan is just as loud. But yeah, so now the next step is to finish prepping the image. I have a stock image that I'm making some modifications to, so I need to finish prepping that image, and then I need to copy it over and boot it up, see if it works. Hopefully it does. And because I didn't address it, I decided against doing any major modifications to this harness for right now. The main reason being, I don't really want to chop up the original power cable. I want to leave that as is. I did remove the 12 volt line just to be certain that no 12 volt goes into this SCSI SD, because it's just not needed, period, for anything. And it's not beautiful, but it's not hideous. But I am going to, I've got some, like, here's an example. And I might actually just go ahead and do this now. I've got a couple of these right angle Molex plugs that has this snap cap and just goes right in there, and I might modify this with that. Yeah, now that I'm looking at this and thinking about that, I think that's what I want to do. So that's probably what I will come back with. As promised, here is the power connector that I just came up with. So it uses this right angle, kind of crimp down, snap down connector that I had in some parts, and it just goes right like that. And then this guy plugs in right there, and then there we go. Very nice and neat and tidy. Almost like it was designed for it. So very clean fit. I'm very pleased with that. And that has motivated me to try out my slightly longer SCSI cable idea. So I'm going to do that next. Almost suspiciously simple. This is the connector I moved. You can see it's got some scratches on it because I used a razor blade to cut off the cable so it would be cut flush. But all I had to do was pop off the plastic ends, peel off the old cable, just peeled right off, line up the replacement correctly. You can see the way the keys are, they're correctly aligned. Start pressing it down a little bit, and then I realized it really needs this black locking top bit to properly apply pressure. And as far as I can tell, it's good. And this end of the cable particularly had one pin cut out already. I don't know why. I'm assuming it's to improve flexibility. This is the cable I used with the SCSI SD version 5, so aside from shortening it, it already worked. But now what I'm going to do is pop out the original one here, which, like I said, is kind of at an angle, which I'm not thrilled about, and pop in this slightly longer replacement. See, and I can, it's kind of hard to tell, I can push the cable down and it can kind of go under this SCSI SD, and then I can shift it a little bit. And zoop, 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 it locks on there nicely. And then now, we still have, you know, a good connection. It's a little bit tight, but the original cable isn't stressed in any way that's not comfortable. And since I also modified, you know, went with my own power harness, I have both the original SCSI data and power cable. I just like to keep the original parts on old machines like this. Like I'm gonna keep the hard drive for this thing too. I'm never gonna use it, but I like to keep all the original parts. Just like I'm gonna keep the original fan. I just need to set aside a box. But yeah, I'm happy with how that turned out. I'm going to make another one of these for when I eventually do the NeXTstation color over there. But for the time being, I'm happy with that. I haven't tested it yet, obviously, but I've got no reason to think it shouldn't work just fine. Moment of truth, here goes. The only thing I didn't do that I wish I could have done is feed the USB cable for the SCSI to SD out through the floppy drive slot. Has a connector that I thought was pretty slim, but it's thick. It's too thick. I mean, it's just like neat, no worky. So I might slim this down, just sand it a little bit. I may have another cable somewhere, but really it's not a huge deal to move this monitor. But anyway, so here goes the first boot with the new fan, the new RAM, the new SCSI SD, and the new power harness. So here goes nothing. I'm not really expecting it to work, but it'd be nice if it did. Okay, that's a good sign. I guess it likes the RAM well enough. I don't expect much, if any, performance boost from the old V50 to the new drive. This will probably complain here about the network configuration in a minute. I'll just let it get up there and balk at us. This usually takes a moment before you've specifically configured the network. It's trying to do an auto configuration. Oh look, it's Marco. Anyway, there you go. See, it's trying to do an auto config. We just hit Control C and it'll keep on chugging. Marco's very helpful. Let's see about fan noise. I mean, it is very quiet. I can barely hear a hum. So that's a big improvement. So log in, root, no password. And then let's pull up our info panel. Sure enough, now reads 32 megs of RAM. So it looks like it took. So really the next step is to finish partitioning the SD card, because this one is set up. You can see here, I might have to make a new hole is. Get rid of it. Here it is. Alright, so if you take a look at this, you can see that the creator of this image set it up with 4 disk images. So we have SD0, that's our boot partition, SD1, SD2, SD3 are our disks 1, 2, and 3, and except for disk 3, those are all 2 gig partitions. So this has 4 SCSI devices. Well, the SCSI SD can support 7 SCSI devices, and this is a 32 gig SD card. So my intention is to, at least to start, to add 2 more for, well, at least 1 more for Next Step, and then 2 for Daydream. So 1 probably for System 7, 7.6.1, and then I would like to try 8.1 as well, but we can pass, see if I enable these. I have to scan first. Derp. So I could pass 2 more. So I can't put ID 7. I could put ID 0. That's not, anyway, I could put up to 3 devices on the, whoa, that's interesting. It just locked my frame rate. Anyway, so I'd like to do 2 more drives specifically for Daydream as physical devices, and then I'll have 1 more as a floater that I'll use for writing out the discs, the actual boot CD, because I do not have an HD50 SCSI CD drive that I could connect to this machine. But yeah, I am very pleased with this little adventure. So far this has been, you know, more or less a screaming success, because everything I did worked. You know, my RAM came over just fine. The new SCSI SD mounted nicely, and my hacked together cable worked. So I guess I don't need to make another one of those for the NeXTstation Color. And then let's see what else. And the fan worked very well also. So yeah, very happy. So now, for all intents and purposes, this NeXTstation is maxed out. It still needs a little bit of cleaning. There's a little bit of dust on the board, and then the rubber rollers of the Megapixel 17 have gunk in them, and I need to figure out how to clean that without messing up the rubber, because that's the sort of rubber can be very sensitive. The display itself was pretty icky, but it cleaned up well. It still needs some adjustment. For example, if you look at this window, see how the, sorry, Marco is bumping into my hand here. The info text at the top for this menu item is narrower than quit, and if I drag it down, it grows wider. Yeah, just the picture isn't perfectly adjusted. It's a lot better than it was. This thing was a mess when I first started playing with it, but it's significantly better. One thing I'm curious about, I thought it had a working clock battery. Let's see what Pref says as far as state and time, because this is saying March 19th at 5:06 p.m., which is decidedly incorrect. Let's go to date and time. Yeah, that is not correct. But anyway, that's it for now. This project has been a success. I'm very happy with it. My NeXTstation is now a lot more usable, with 4 times as much RAM, a better boot drive, and a much quieter fan. I really do need to get a recording of that old fan because it is just nasty. But yeah, that's it for now. Until next time. Right, Marco? Right?